So we were in the car and Miley Cyrus's song Wrecking Ball came on the radio.
Uh-huh.
And I guess my son really likes the song because he did that thing that kids do sometimes where he like immediately stopped talking or messing around and just listened silently for 3 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And then afterwards he goes, "Daddy, what's a wrecking ball?" And so I started trying to explain to him what a wrecking ball was. And I could tell he wasn't getting it. So like I was just like, "I'll just show you." Right. And so I brought up some videos of wrecking balls destroying buildings, of which there are on YouTube because YouTube is incredible. And he liked that. And then he saw the music video for Wrecking Ball. It like the cover image, the thumbnail image is like Miley Cyrus's face, like really zoomed in on her face. And so he was like, "What's that?" And he goes, "Oh, well, that's the music video for the song you were listening to." And he goes, "Oh, can I watch that?" No. Yeah, sure. Because I knew it had a wrecking ball in it, and I was like, "Oh, this will be fun." He knows what a wrecking ball is now. Like she rides on the wrecking ball, and he'll know, and that's fun. Which is all true. What I had forgotten is when she does ride on the wrecking ball, she does it with no clothes on.
Oh, okay.
She is completely nude. So I kind of just decided to make a joke out of it and just be like, "Oh, she's naked. That's silly." And he thought it was hilarious. And so now every time he takes off his clothes for bath time, he starts running around singing the Wrecking Ball song. So I may have broken my child forever, but we'll see.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. He's not gonna have like a thing for sex in construction equipment when he's older. That's
and so what if he does? Everybody's got to have their thing.
Touche. Hello and welcome to Flanagan's Wake, a Doof Media podcast drinking the steam of Mike Flanagan. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. Joining me, as always, coming at you, your head from our weird radio, it's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Yep, once again, this is one of those episodes that's broadcast on The Shining. So you don't need to use a podcatcher. You can just tune in with your Shine, and you'll catch it.
Yeah, I think the longtime listeners out there, if you take your headphones out right now, close your eyes, and concentrate very hard, you will just hear our voices because that's what we've done to you. You're welcome.
That's true. This is definitely true.
Yeah. This week on the show, we are continuing with Stephen King's Dr. Sleep as we discuss chapters 4 through 6 of the novel. We learn, finally, exactly why Dan is called Dr. Sleep. Then we see what the True Knot has been up to. It's got all good stuff. And then the book finally, 200 pages in, allows us to kind of see how all these disparate plot lines could possibly in the future come together at some point to make, I believe they call it a story.
Yeah. I was going to say, we're going to have some story in this story analysis podcast.
So, Matt, what did you think of chapters 4 through 6 of Dr. Sleep?
There's a lot of really great stuff here that I think, like, I'm really falling in love with this, this Dan character. And I guess that's not something we've explicitly talked about, but just the fact that, we got to know Danny Torrance quite well in The Shining. We read The Shining. We talked about The Shining at great length. This is effectively a totally different character, which is expected because he's 30 years older. And we've gotten to know him. We met him in a really, really terribly low point, and we spent most of the first weeks reading with him, either in that low point or sort of clawing his way out of that low point. And for pretty much this whole week, we kind of see who he really is, right? We see he's a nice guy. He's a reliable guy. He cares about people. He does have that streak of anger. We do see that, but the way that it's actually employed in the story only makes us like him even more. So that's you asked me how I felt about this week's reading. That was the thing that stood out to me, is how much this character is vibing with me.
Great. No, that's great to hear. Yeah. I'm really enjoying this too, for my part. I think the parts of the book that I don't love have not occurred yet. For the most part, with the little 9/11 complaint I had last week aside, I think, but the parts of the book I don't really love have not happened yet. And so far, I've just been really enjoying my time with it. So
Mhm.
this was a lot. This was about half the number of pages as we read last week, but it was very quick reading for me. And I'm really enjoying all the characters, and I'm enjoying what we're doing. And the book is certainly taking its time to set everything up, which is not a bad thing. And it is a very Stephen King thing that he
Yeah.
sometimes slow rolls the table setting before we get to the plot jumping forward.
Yeah, for some reason, it reminds me a lot of Duma Key in terms of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not knowing what the story was going to be for a long time, and yet not minding because the character was working on me so well. I remember feeling very much like that about that character. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's get right into our reading for the week. We start with chapter 4, titled Paging Dr. Sleep. At long last, we finally get our chapter explaining exactly what Dan is doing in these hospices. He seems to have this talent. Everyone talks about how good at hospice care he is. And we know already that this place calls him Dr. Sleep, and we still, up until this point, hadn't learned why they called him that. And after reading this chapter, Matt, I kind of retroactively understand exactly why King went the route he did. That we talked about it last week. I don't think we were necessarily saying it was a bad thing, but just that it was a surprising thing that we kind of move around what he's doing in hospice care. We move around this name Dr. Sleep, and we kind of hold why all this matters and what is actually happening here. And I think the reason is, aside from all the reasons we talked about last week, the real reason is to create this incredibly powerful moment um in this chapter that I was very moved by. I think this is some great stuff here. And does it to get there, do you have to kind of awkwardly sidestep some of the stuff and say, don't worry, we'll talk about that later? Yes. But to land on a moment as effective as this one, I think it all makes it worth it to me.
yeah, I agree. I think the awkward sidestepping is really just about compartmentalizing things so that they have their space to breathe. Um, Yeah, I thought it was a great moment. I have like a practical quibble that almost descends to the level of a nitpick, or perhaps you can just explain to me what I'm missing here. Um, the people who he helps die are not telling the other residents that he helped them die
That's true because they are dead.
because they're dead. So how is he getting this reputation exactly? I that is not clear to me. Perhaps it's just meant to be as simple as like, well, the workers and the other residents are aware that this man arrives and he sits with these people, and then when they die, they seem to pass in a way that is very peaceful, unusually peaceful, and that's all there is to it. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of it than it needs to be. I'm sure I'm making a bigger deal out of it than it needs to be. It's just something that I felt like I missed something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question. I mean, I don't think the book comes right out and tells you this, but I think if you read between the lines, you maybe can develop a headcanon, which is we're in 2007 now, right? So he's been living in this town and sober for 7 years. He's been working at the hospice for, I mean, let's say conservatively 6.5 years. My guess here is that the reputation, at least at this building, was gained by other people being in the room with him when he was doing these things, right? We're 7 years into his employ here. Everyone knows him, understands what he does. He's got this reputation now. And so are the nurses going to come into the room with him when he's doing his thing? Probably not anymore. But
Mhm.
I just have a feeling that these are nurses that work in a hospice that see people die every day, and to see that a lot of times these people die hard, that they die scared, that it is not an easy transition for a lot of these people. And then this guy comes in, and every time he's involved with this, their death is peaceful, quiet. The patient seems calm, even even happy and content in a way. And I think that's where it comes from. Does the book ever say this? Does it ever spell it out? No. But I think that's the case.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing in this instance, they just call him and send him in to the room because they know what he does.
Yeah.
So they're not witnessing it anymore. But I just feel like they did probably at the beginning.
I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think maybe the piece of the puzzle that I was missing is simply the fact that the other workers at the hospice know on some level that he's doing something very special and possibly supernatural, and maybe in their own minds they don't put it in those in that many words, but they maybe they think to themselves, man, Danny really has a way with these people. He's really
Yeah.
special, or maybe they're more superstitious about it. Who knows? The point is that they do see it as a unique, special thing that he does, and so
Yeah.
got it.
So, like I said, it is 2007. We've jumped forward 4 more years. Abra is 7 years old now, and Dan, as we said, is on year 7 of his sobriety. I don't think we ever specifically said this last week, so let's just say it right now. Abra's birth and Dan's, if we want to call it rebirth, occur basically at the same time, within months of each other, and I think that is something that's worth calling out here, right?
Mm-hmm. I love that. It didn't occur to me at the time. I think part of the reason it didn't occur to me is that it wasn't, it's not clear to us that that was Dan's low point, and he is in fact going to successfully climb back onto the path of sobriety, and everything's going to be essentially up and up for him from then on, and that was actually sort of a punctuation mark. And also, I guess, frankly, the parallel structure of like we're going to be following Dan and Abra as they grow up together in these punctuated steps.
Yeah.
That wasn't necessarily clear to me that was going to be the structure, but now that you point that out, that's a fantastic point, that he hit his rock bottom and decided to make a change at around the time she was born.
Yeah. And I kind of love the idea that this is not a book about someone trying to get sober, right? This is not a book about an alcoholic hitting his rock bottom. It's not a book about an alcoholic struggling through the early days of trying to get sober. This is a book about an alcoholic who has managed to succeed in their sobriety. They've gone through, I don't want to say the worst of it, because I think it always is going to be a struggle, but by the end of this reading, we move forward 12 years total. I think we've got 10 years, and then the very end of the chapter it says he didn't talk to Abra for another 2 years after that. So that's 12 years total we've seen of Dan holding on to his sobriety. And so that becomes a very different kind of addiction story.
Mm-hmm.
It is the addiction story of someone who has overcome, but let's talk about the ways in which that still remains a struggle, in all those different ways. And we know Dan is holding on to one big secret that he hasn't talked about yet. And that is, of course, going to come up eventually. It has to. It's like, this how stories work.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like that idea that here, like, The Shining was a book about an alcoholic. It was the book about an alcoholic succumbing to their alcoholism. And this is not a book about an alcoholic being cured of their alcoholism. It's a book about an alcoholic years and years later living with their sobriety and their addiction, and a thing that I just think Stephen King probably knows a great deal about, right?
Yeah.
I think he knows a great deal about every step along this path, but this is, I think, a part of it that I don't think we see very often. Like, a great example of this is like in A Haunting of Hill House, we saw Luke in his first moments of sobriety, right? We saw him get that 90 days, and then we leave the story with him like, oh, you did it, Luke. We, like, 2 years sober. That was just long enough time in that story where we're like, I think he's finally done it. He's finally accomplished it, right? He's going to get there. 2 years. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't, like, that's the end of the story. We don't live with Luke in 2 years and 1 day, or 2 years and 3 months, or 4 years, or 7 years, or 12 years. And that's what we're doing here. And I just think that's really intriguing.
Yeah. And also, I know we're breaking the linear discussion of the episode, but basically we're hitting him in moments of weakness where
Mhm.
he indeed does not break, but it just shows you that even after years and years of diligence and really, active energy put into maintaining his sobriety, he can still get these feelings creeping up on him if the right
Yeah.
triggers hit him,
Yeah.
um, to catch him in a moment of weakness. So
Yeah. So we find Dan here, sleeping and dreaming of the Overlook Hotel once again. He's on the second floor of the hotel and seeing that spooky fire hose that is not a snake, but is also definitely a snake. I thought about like being really hard on Dan here in this moment, Matt, about how like he really needs to get over this. It's been like 40 years almost. Get over the Overlook. But I also still sometimes dream about that creepy fire hose snake myself, so I can't be too hard on him.
yeah, I thought it was actually pretty interesting that it was the snake, right? It's not any of the other horrifying shit. It's not the giant, you know, manta ray ghost thing at the end. It's the fire hose, which in fact, like nothing even happens with the fire hose.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not his
I think the most
dad's.
it does is it like falls off the thing, right? It
I,
doesn't
I
even reach for him. It just kind of
I
falls
think
off the
that's right.
stand.
Like, I think he imagines it being scary and like rearing up like a cobra and stuff like this, but all it does is it falls. Like, there's so much where he saw his father smash his own face to a pulp with a mallet. But the thing that he has a nightmare about is the fire hose. Now, the reason I think this is interesting and is that like the story is really about, well, it's about a lot of things, but like the fact that Dan was a child, that Danny was a child, and it's like the kinds of things that a child is afraid of that is really like what was created by his imagination. Because all of the
Yeah,
fear of the fire hose monster, there was no fire hose monster. The fear of the fire hose was in his mind entirely.
yeah,
And there's a lot to be said about the idea that like the things that we fear the most and the most persistently maybe are really the things that we kind of create, that the monsters we create in our own minds. Um, I think this actually even ties in an interesting way with the idea that in a sense all of the ghosts in the Overlook are quote unquote created by Danny,
yeah,
not intentionally, obviously, but it's just an interesting thought about our place, our role in our own demons. And alcoholism could be tied into this too. I know I'm kind of like putting pins all over the corkboard here, but I really think it really just struck me that using the fire hose instead of any of the other things really struck me.
yeah. I think that's a fantastic point. I really like all that. I agree with you. This is a specific memory that seems like we've done a lot of like return to the Overlook stuff so far, which makes sense. For it to be this specific dream, I think is very telling. And I like what you said.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to point out here, though, is like we were kind of told last week, Dan's dreams end up being fairly prophetic in some ways. Like he sees the past, right? He sees the Overlook, or there was that one moment where he saw red rum written on the sink, and then in the sink was the little boy's Atlanta Braves t-shirt. The little boy that was asking for the candy was wearing an Atlanta Braves shirt. Um, but in those dreams there's always something that's prophetic about the future, like it's Deanie doesn't just appear to him. Deanie appears to him and says stay away from the hat woman, right?
Mhm.
And I thought that the really interesting intersection here, we have him think of the Overlook, we have him think of this snake fire hose, but we see that the snake starts buzzing at him, and the book specifically describes it like a rattlesnake, right? And I know
Mhm.
it's been established that we have this Andy character who we'll learn in this week's reading is referred to now as Snakebite Andy, as we're connecting that image. We had the image of the rattlesnake from the first that chapter with Andy where we introduced to her, and now we have him this buzzing sounds like a rattlesnake to him, and I think this is doing that. This is like once again his power, like picking up on future events and like trying to warn him in some way or another.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I love that the buzzing happens and then the buzzing merges into the intercom buzzing, which I don't know. I love when that happens in movies. It's just fun to see it happen in a book.
Yeah. Yeah. So the buzzing is an intercom. It's Claudette, the nurse on duty that night, who is calling him to inform him that one of the residents is probably going to need Dan's help tonight. Then King gets to show us what the little cat Azrael, the angel of death, does. We see that he just seems to know when one of the guests is approaching their last moment. He stays away, like basically has run on the joint. He goes wherever he wants. He lounges wherever he wants. The one thing he doesn't do is go into a guest's room unless that guest is about to die. So I mean that's interesting, right? Like this is, I think, a little bit like it's there's lots of stories in myth about like cats and
Mhm.
the powers that cats have. And so we're just kind of channeling that here, and I like that we don't actually spend too much time explaining it. It's just like, oh, the cat has this funny foresight, and that's it. And we
Yeah.
don't need to go in any more detail than that. We talked a lot last week about how this book, as opposed to The Shining, is putting bounds and rules on these type of powers in a lot more ways. But this is one of those ways that it shouldn't, and I'm glad it doesn't.
Yeah. I does the cat have the shining? No, it doesn't matter. It's just
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
it's kind of like you said. There's a lot of sort of mythos around cats, but I don't. Other than I guess I never read Pet Cemetery. That's got a creepy cat in it. The only other Stephen King creepy cat I can think of is the cat in the movie Cat's Eye, which is
Yeah.
a heroic cat actually, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a psychic cat for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I do not think Church and Pet Cemetery would be classified as a heroic cat.
no.
Um,
Maybe this cat, maybe Azrael is the cat from Cat's Eye.
I mean, sure, why not?
After it did all those adventures, it retired to a hospice, and yeah,
It's a
there
good
you
cat.
go.
It's a good
Headcanon
cat.
accepted, everyone.
So on his way down to visit with Charlie Hayes, the damned, the person that the cat has selected to die this evening, Dan comes across Fred Carling, who is the orderly that is on duty that night. He works the midnight shift at the hospice every night, and he's, well, as we'll see here, he's kind of a giant prick. I actually love the way the text describes this, Matt. Carling was an unfeeling dolt, and how he'd gotten a job here, even on the night shift when most of the guests were either asleep or trying to be quiet so they wouldn't disturb anyone else, was beyond Dan. He suspected somebody might have pulled a wire or two. It was how the world worked. Hadn't his own father pulled a wire to get his final job as caretaker of the Overlook Hotel? So I love this on multiple reasons. I love the description of someone as an unfeeling dolt. And we see this is a pretty accurate description of Mr. Carling. But then of course Danny has to also relate it back to his father and the Overlook, and I just to say it, like it was decades ago, but it is still a clear and present like thought in Dan's mind pretty consistently.
Yeah, it's almost like the more time has passed, the more it has just become a motif in his thoughts that he doesn't even particularly feel anything about it. It's just there. It's just the backdrop against which all of his other thoughts are taking place, which is a kind of growth, because it's better than having those thoughts be there, unacknowledged and yet causing huge amounts of damage. It's like, well, now they're acknowledged, but I think the final step of growing beyond them maybe is to just not have to think about his father at all, unless he wants to.
Yeah.
I thought the thing about Fred is interesting. Adding this element into the story at this point, because he's a prick. The book makes it clear, but like to step back from it, that we're also showing that Dan is definitely a pretty disagreeable and aggressive chap. We see Fred needs to be taken down a peg. He needs to be confronted, probably. Is this the most mature way to do it? Basically Dan assaulting him? Probably not. Because we're identified with Dan and we're in his head, we kind of give a little fist bump, but it's definitely showing that Dan has that dark edge to him, that like his father, and we're being reminded of that. I just think it's interesting. I know that doesn't quite happen yet, but like we have like basically his greatest moment punctuated with him attacking a man. So we're getting the two sides of this character still.
Yeah, no, I I agree with you. I like that. I also like here we've now established this person as reminding Dan of his father, right? And he has this very violent, aggressive
Mm,
interaction with him
mm,
here in a bit. So
mm,
I think it just goes to continue to establish that Dan's relationship with his dad is very, very complicated.
yeah.
And I think you're right that he's doing okay with it, but there's still a lot there that I don't think he's fully allowed himself to face. Like, let's remember the thing he did about the Overlook specifically at the very beginning of the book is he locked all those ghosts in lock boxes and shoved them to the back of his mind. And I mean, yes, he thinks about the Overlook a lot, but has he thought about those ghosts that are still living in boxes in the back of his brain somewhere? I haven't heard him think about those yet in the story, right?
Mm.
So
No, me neither.
yeah, maybe he has his dad locked in one of those and just hasn't thought about it. I mean, let's the one thing we haven't said is like there's lots of dead spirits at the Overlook. Like, could Jack Torrance be one of them?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, that's actually you know the idea of the afterlife. So there's so many things I could say here because like we have this idea that we introduce of the steam, which the True Knot feeds on, and then we have this red steam that we're about to see, and then we have ghosts, and it's like, well, what are we going to get all nitty gritty into the details of when ghosts form? Because maybe um if he was lucky, he just died and it didn't turn into a ghost. But I don't know. I'm rambling now, but it's interesting. I'm not sure where we're going to go with this.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I
Yeah,
like thinking about it for sure.
yeah.
The other thing I really like here that I don't think we've ever actually said out loud that we should stay is the idea. Dan comes to the nurse's station, checks in with the nurses, and when he asks who the doctor on duty is, he's told himself in kind of like a haha jokey way because his nickname is Dr. Sleep. The actual doctor, the medical doctor on duty, is snowed in. There's a big snowstorm happening and can't get to the hospital. So it's just going to be Dan here tonight. And this is I just want to say, like, let's remind ourselves that Danny's nickname as a child from his parents and then later Dick Halloran was Doc, right? It was Doc from Bugs Bunny, but they called him Doc. And I just want us to so we don't get accused of like skipping over this. Like, he is now Dr. Sleep. He is Doc, like his grown up nickname. I think one of the nurses even calls him Doc in the
Mm,
scene, and that's what made me think of it. Is he is Doc again.
that's wonderful. I don't think I caught that. So thank you for covering our asses here. Uh, it's so good actually that either the word, the nickname Doc was the seed that gave King the idea to make Danny, basically a sort of hospice worker who helps people die, or,
Yeah.
or else I kind of enjoy the thought that maybe he just always had this in mind as a future for Danny Torrance, even back from The Shining. I don't think that's actually true. Honestly, I think it's probably more the other way around that he was thinking about this character and then he's like, Doc, yeah, he could be he could be a doctor, he could be and then think about things he wants to say about the nature of death and um we'll talk more about that later, I think, but that's definitely one thing this book is doing well is it's tying together all these ideas
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah. My guess would be like a lot of King's ideas. I think he took this idea he had for telling a story about Dan Torrance years after the events of The Shining, and then he took maybe a separate idea he had for a hospice worker that has a power that allows them to assist the dying, and he said, "Oh, these fit well together," and he combined them together and created this. So, I think it's one of those. Like, it seems like a lot of his ideas for stories originate as a series of different ideas that he finds a way to connect together to make an overarching story and theme. Um, I think this is one of those ones that just worked. Well, it's like once he had that idea, oh, we can call him Doctor Sleep, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
great.
Love it.
So the dying man is Charlie Hayes. He's located in the Alan Shepard suite. I included the name of the suite, Matt, just to see if you could mine any additional meaning from that. Alan Shepard is, I believe, the first American in space, right? I couldn't think of anything from that.
Nope.
Okay.
Sorry.
Dan enters the room and finds Charlie, well, dying. He takes his hand and then I just want to read this because this is like my favorite bit of writing in the entire book so far. He saw Charlie's twin sons at 4 on swings. He saw Charlie's wife pulling down a shade in the bedroom, wearing nothing but the slip of Belgian lace he'd bought for her for their first anniversary. Saw how her ponytail swung over one shoulder when she turned to look at him, her face lit in a smile that was all yes. He saw a Farmall tractor with striped umbrella raised over its seat. He smelled bacon and heard Frank Sinatra singing Come Fly With Me from a cracked Motorola radio, sitting on a work table littered with tools. He saw a hubcap full of rain reflecting a red barn. He tasted blueberries and gutted a deer and fished in some distant lake whose surface was dappled by a steady autumn rain. He was 60, dancing with his wife in the American Legion Hall. He was 30, splitting wood. He was 5, wearing shorts and pulling a red wagon. Then the pictures blurred together, the way cards do when they're shuffled in the hands of an expert, and the wind was blowing big snow down from the mountains, and in here was the silence and Azzy's solemn watching eyes. At times like this, Dan knew what he was for. At times like this, he regretted none of the pain and sorrow and anger and horror, because they had brought him here, to this room, while the wind whooped outside. Charlie Hayes had come to the border. Like, that's like the reason you write the book, right? Like
Yeah.
that right there is like, this is why the book exists. I
Yeah.
just find that absolutely moving and beautiful. And to jump to months ahead, I think one of the most satisfying there's many satisfying movies in Mike Flanagan's adaptation of the story. One of the most moving and satisfying moments in that movie are Dan doing the Doctor Sleep thing to me. They always get me choked up, and I think Flanagan expertly channeled. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about his movie when I read this, because I was like, oh, you nailed it, Mike. You nailed it. Like, this is beautiful, beautiful writing. It's very moving. It distills an entire man's life down to a paragraph, but in a way that doesn't feel short shrifted, that feels complete and whole, and a life well lived, and the type of like satisfaction and contentment that I hope I feel when the time comes.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. It gives you this feeling of contentment, and
Yeah.
it single-handedly kind of turns down the knob on your fear of death, whatever level of fear of death you happen to have. I think it's like, yeah, we have our time on the earth, and it's beautiful, and it comes to an end, and it can be quiet and peaceful, and there's no need to fear because you can just reflect on the beauty that there was. And but it's said a million times more poetically than I just did, and that's why he's Stephen King.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Charlie says here at the end that he's scared of there being nothing after death, and Dan assures him that there is something. And then we see he kind of inhabits Charlie's body here, right? He becomes Charlie, and he helps Charlie to sleep, and he's with him physically in the room, but also like he's spirit. Like it's almost as if it's not possession, but it's not possession, right? It's kind of like a shared possession. Like he's in him. He's part of him in these final moments.
Yeah. Mind melding with him,
Yeah.
He's sharing in the experience so that he's not alone, basically. I think that's fundamentally there's a lot of like, what is life for happening in this book.
Yeah.
This is the point I wanted to hit here, is talk about how smart this book is about setting up these ideas, comparing and contrasting what Dan is doing right now with like the way the villains have been established, and how if you take those things together, you begin to see the shape of the thesis of what the book is doing, because the True Knot causes people to die horribly in order to pervert the natural order and prolong their own lives, And in contrast, Dan, he helps people die peacefully in keeping with the natural order, and his own life entails suffering. It does, and struggle, but he feels a profound fulfillment and purpose due to his role in this process of helping these people die. And in contrast, I don't think anybody in the True Knot ever feels like, oh, this is what I'm here for. I think, for them, it's just this desperate, empty continuation of existence. So it's almost like the top note of what we're doing with Dan in this scene is underscored and emphasized by what the True Knot is doing, and that explains the meaning of all this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I very well said. I love that contrast. I mean, I think that's like one of the things I've been paying attention to most across the board is like the antagonists and the protagonists who have yet to meet and so far aren't even aware of each other's existence, except for like tangentially, the ways in which the book is defining theme through how they live, how they endure, let's say, and those big contrasts, like you said, the idea of peacefully moving on when it's your time versus stubbornly insisting upon living forever, Matt.
Reading King books really batters down my defenses because it's like you just said, he's so poetic and like persuasive but persuasive because he's not trying to persuade you. It's just the poetry of, look at this, isn't this beautiful? And it's like, I have no argument to that. Yes, it is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, and in King's world, there is no eternal life without some horrific cost, right? Like we'll see in next chapter, like we kind of know what the cost of what they do is, but I think we get to see it firsthand in the next chapter, and that is it makes it very clear that this is a horrific cost for this kind of never-ending life.
Right.
I also like another thing I wanted to directly compare it to is like, we joked last week about how I read the prelude and thought that Dr. Sleep for a brief moment was Snakebite Andy, because she's a character we meet, and the first thing she does when we meet her is she puts someone to sleep. I was like, oh, okay. Now we know that that's not true. Now we know that Danny is called that because part of what he does, he uses the shine to mind meld, as you said, with these people, and then kind of gently coax them to their eternal sleep. I think it's really interesting that we have two characters in the story that have been established that both do things related to sleep and how different those are, right? Like just like the contrast between the True Knot's forceful decision to live forever and Danny's calmly and poetically bringing people to the border, as King writes it. Danny's sleep and Andy's sleep are just entirely different from each other.
Yeah, I mean, her sleep is also so that she can prey on people. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, that's a great connection.
And this is something you talked about a little bit before, but I just bring it up here. As Charlie dies, we see that a red mist or steam kind of comes out of his mouth and floats above him for a little bit. This is something that Danny sees. I keep calling him Danny. I'm going to keep doing this. He's Dan. He's an adult. He's Dan. Sorry for any of the adult Dannys out there that are like, what the fuck? A red mist floats above their heads and then slowly dissipates, and he sees this every single time. Every single time he witnesses someone dies, this happens. Now this is similar to the steam that happens when the True Knot eats, right? But different, right? Their steam we see is silvery. The steam is red. So I mean, what's your take here?
Well, I think it's like the steam that the vampires consume is described as being like sort of created by their suffering as they die, whereas this red steam is the product of a peaceful passing on. and then it goes somewhere. The silver steam is consumed, the red steam just kind of dissipates and vanishes. I am I completely hallucinating, or was there something vaguely like this in Insomnia? I'm
Man, I don't
probably
remember.
I'm
You might
probably
be right.
I'm probably thinking of, I guess this is kind of a spoiler, but also it will sound like just gibberish, so it doesn't really matter. I think I'm thinking of like the balloon strings, which is not really quite the same thing.
Mm.
But anyway, I was just trying to make a connection to other King things that he had done before involving, you know, the threshold of death. Because interestingly, I mean, a lot of King stories actually concern life and death and ghosts and the nature of, what happens when you die, or the question of it rather. Because he, interestingly, I feel like even despite the fact we've read 5 million books, he never really quite says exactly what he thinks happens, or what happens in his Dark Tower greater universe. It's always left vague intentionally. So.
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of the way it is here, right? Because as Charlie dies, he says, "I see my wife," and so we're we're led to believe that now is that there's like Charlie Dan confidently says to Charlie, "Death is not the end. There's something more." Um, and I don't think he's like lying about that. I don't think Dan fully knows what that thing is. I just think he feels with he lives in a world with he has this power. He knows that spirits exist. He knows that there's some presence that lingers either for good or ill, and
Mhm.
and confidently says that there's something else beyond all this. But yeah, I kind of love that we've never got that definitive answer. Even we spent so much time building up, what this world is amongst all these books, and what all these things mean, and but yeah, he refuses to kind of conclude on what happens after death. And I think it's because he doesn't know the answer. And it would, like, we talk so much about how to Stephen King one of the most important things in the world is truth, is being true to himself and being true to the way he sees the world. And I think the honest, truthful answer that Stephen King would give you is, I have the things that I believe in, but I don't know, and it would feel false for me to paint a picture that makes a definitive declarative statement on what happens after death.
Yeah, exactly. He's not trying to offer sort of false solace. He's trying to take what he perceives to be the situation, which is that we are all stuck in this mystery where we don't know. We just don't. You can hold to your faith as firmly as you possibly can, but you just don't know, and that's terrifying. And so it almost feels like kind of a culmination of a theme he's pursued his whole career, that we have Dan here, serving this role where it's like he is the boatman helping people cross over, um, and not knowing what's on the other side, but just trying to help them have some assurance that something is on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I like it. I like it all.
Yeah,
This is really good stuff. This is definitely my favorite part of this week's reading for sure.
yeah.
Um, so we have this brief moment that I just want to mention here, and we'll circle back to it later, where Dan detects Abra in the room with him after Charlie goes. And I want to bring this up again when we see her do the same thing for the True Knot in the next chapter. But let's just say it here that Abra uses her weird radio, as we'll see it called later, and witnesses Dan do this for Charlie.
Hmm. Yep.
But he's not done yet, Matt, because after he finishes up with Charlie, he's got one more bone to pick for the night. He saw bruises on Charlie's arm that were made by Fred Carling, and I love Matt, the barely held back anger here. We talked about this a little already, but the book is so consciously playing with the ideas that Dan is and perhaps always will be Jack Torrance's son. But to give Dan the credit, he does manage to like keep himself relatively under control. He doesn't beat the shit out of Fred Carling. He just, yanks a chair out from under him, and then makes specific threats.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he only slightly kicks his ass, so that's control.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said a minute ago, it's we're being reminded of the two sides of this character. He's this incredibly compassionate man who we really do see young Danny Torrance in this version of him, where he's just this sweet, compassionate man who just wants to spare people pain, but also, man, does it piss him off to see injustice, and he's not going to act, prudently and patiently. He's going to lash out, and it could have been a worse lashing out, but it was still a lashing out.
Yeah. Let's give him a little bit of credit, but not entirely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's fair. And I think this is important because we see I love this section here where we kind of jump into Carling's head a little bit, and we see some guys had lousy circuit breakers in their heads. They tripped easy. And once they did, those guys would burn on until they burned out. He had taken Torrance for some mousy little geek who wouldn't say shit if he had a mouthful, but he saw that he'd been wrong about that. His secret identity wasn't Dr. Sleep. It was Dr. Crazy. I
love
love it.
that.
I love it. Like this is it is important sometimes when we're in these very close. It's a third person perspective novel, but it's a very close third person perspective, right? We get to jump into Dan's head quite a bit. It's good to see characters from other people's perspectives sometimes. It's good to see how people perceive Dan Torrance because he feels like he's got a pretty good lid on his anger and his rage issues, but people notice.
Yeah.
People notice.
Have you ever had a friend or acquaintance who had the switch in their head where they were delightful most of the time, but then something cut them the wrong way, they would pop a cork? That's it's hard to ever quite see a person the same way again after you have seen them reveal themselves to be Dr. Crazy.
Yep. I have a friend like that, and you know him because he lived in our dorm in freshman year. You know exactly who I'm talking about right now. Great guy. Love him. Love him to death. Still talk with him. But man, he flips a switch sometimes, especially when he was drinking.
Yeah, that makes sense. I
Yeah.
think that's meant to be tied into this, even though Dan is not drinking, he still has this switch, and it's obviously we know for a fact that it's much worse when he is drinking because then he'll just wake up in jail. So
yeah, I think this is definitely something we said about Jack Torrance, though. We said Jack Torrance is an alcoholic, but alcohol is not his only problem. Like Jack Torrance had anger issues outside of his drinking issues. It's just they exacerbated each other. And I think it makes perfect sense that both are true for Dan here, that he is sober. He is not drinking and his anger issues are still clear and present and he's still having to deal with them every day.
Yeah. It's funny in retrospect, I'm thinking about certain scenes where Jack Torrance just loses his shit at the hotel manager because the hotel manager tells him he's not allowed to write a book about how the hotel has this dark history. And at the time, I if I remember correctly, we kind of read that as like Jack is starting to lose it. The hotel is kind of eroding his sanity. And in retrospect, I'm almost like maybe that was just supposed to indicate that this guy just has this hair trigger where if you deny him something he wants, I think it's both. I think it's like the supernatural is the elevation of the fact that yes, he has a hair trigger.
I think so. And one thing I really like, and this is why I love just like conceptually Stephen King returning to this world and these characters years and years later. King was writing about alcoholism in The Shining from a relatively ignorant place. Like, I mean, like we talked a lot while reading that book about how when he was writing about Jack Torrance, he was writing about himself, even though he wasn't even consciously aware that he was doing it. And so there's an argument to be made that a lot of the rage we see from Jack in that book is possibly caused by a person that has just recently gotten sober and they're struggling with their sobriety, and the anger comes from that ongoing struggle. And one thing I love about this version of that same idea is again that we've established that that Dan Torrance is 7 years sober, right? He has been sober for 7 years. So there's no alternate way you can read his anger issues. Like, you can't say, "Oh, he's just gotten on the wagon and he's really struggling with it and that's why he's so pissed off." It's like, no, it's just Dan Torrance has anger issues. Like, that is just like, it is just clearly stated and described here. And I think the same was true of Jack. And so, like, I just saying, like, he reapproached these characters and these themes and these topics from a much greater understanding of the disease of alcoholism, a much greater understanding of sobriety and what it takes to get sober and what it's like during the first part of sobriety, and then even years and years and years down the line. Like, he has this experience and he has this knowledge and he's writing all this from that great experience and knowledge. And I just think it makes for a much more complicated and nuanced take on this than I think The Shining had, which, again, I thought was a brilliant book, one of his bests, but he didn't know the stuff he knows now.
Yep.
So as Dan returns to his room, he's still angry. He's still pissed the fuck off and he can't sleep. But suddenly Abra is there. She returns to him again to soothe him. And I love this, Matt. Like, this is so, what we're doing here is establishing this symbiotic relationship that exists between the two of them. And we'll see that throughout the rest of this week's reading as well, of that they are there for each other, that they are there to support each other. And I love it as this, you said something last week that really struck a chord with me, with this idea that, like, in a lot of King's writing, these kind of powers, the Shining and the Shining et al., is almost always perceived negatively. It is a curse that makes everyone's lives more difficult that has it. And that's, I think that's generally true for a vast majority of the stories in Stephen King's oeuvre. What I love about this is that we are taking the time to show the good sides of this, both through Dan's existence as Dr. Sleep and what he uses his power to do, but also the way in which this scared, incredibly powerful little girl is able to reach out and have some comforting connection with someone else, and then vice versa, right? That like, perhaps without Abra and Abra's calming presence at some of his most stressed out and lowest points, he might have fallen off the wagon or lost his shit and gotten in a fight with someone, or both, right? Like, this is just conjecture. We don't actually see this, but I do just like that we're starting to see the softer side of this thing as being not just a curse, but a tool that can be used for good.
Yeah, definitely. It has largely switched from being a force that was basically torturing him and literally driving him to drink so that he wouldn't have to deal with it, to being something that brings him a huge amount of meaning and comfort. And like you said, he is using it as a tool. He used it to help his friend find his watch. I think, I mean, sort of know where the story is going. He's going to end up needing to use it, I think, as a tool, as a weapon, perhaps. And then he'll be glad that he has it, rather than feeling like he was unfortunate to be cursed with it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so moving on to chapter 5, The True Knot. It's time for us to catch up with our old buddies, Matt.
Yeah.
See what they're up to.
Love these guys.
I just want to point out what King does here very early in this chapter. He says, the True's towns, with colorful names like Drybend, Jerusalem's Lot, Ori, and Sidewinder, were safe havens, but they never stayed in those places for long. So this is a list of towns that the True Knot owns, essentially. That the land in the town, if you look through various shell corporations, comes back to them. They own these places. Jerusalem's Lot. We know that place.
Yeah. Who lives there? Oh, it's infested with vampires. Or was, or
yeah.
Or so
unclear.
Well, so like the thing about I'm going to spoil that short story, I guess. What was the short story? One for the Road or whatever. What was it, man? I don't remember what the name of the short story was. I thought it was One for the Road. It's the short story that's set like many years after the end of Salem's Lot, where there's clearly still vampires around. So I'm just taking that as my fully accepted belief that the True Knot goes to Salem's Lot and they just hang out with the vampires that are totally still there. But these are the actual vampires. But of course, they're not interested in the True Knot because the True Knot are like they're not really alive either. So
Yeah. I also want to point out that there's the other town mentioned here is Sidewinder, which is the town that basically the town at the base of the mountain that the Overlook Hotel used to sit on. So the town of Sidewinder, also owned by the True Knot. I believe also the town of Oree. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. Oree. I tried to confirm this. I believe it was mentioned offhand in 11/22/63.
okay,
As like one of the places I think that is visited in during the course of that novel. I think Dry Bend is the only one that I think is both a made up town, but not one that King has used in his novels. I could be wrong about that, but just he's got to throw like a non important one in there just for fun.
yeah. No, that's awesome.
Yeah. I also love here this extended diatribe by King about the RV people, which are how King, the True Knot, hide amongst us. And I love this. You hardly see them, right? Why would you? They're just the RV people, elderly retirees and a few young compatriots living their rootless lives on the turnpikes and blue highways, staying at campgrounds where they sit around in their Walmart lawn chairs and cook on their hibachis while they talk about investments and fishing tournaments and hot pot recipes and God knows what. They're the ones who always stop at flea markets and yard sales, parking their damn dinosaurs nose to tail, half on the shoulder and half on the road. I love this because, yeah, of course I know those people. Like, everyone that lives in this country knows RV
Yeah,
people. We see them constantly.
yeah,
And I also think it's generally true that, like, I don't think about them.
mhm,
Like, I see them and I say, oh, it's an elderly couple living in an RV. And then I forget about them almost as soon as they're in the rear view or
yeah.
out of the rear view.
What tends to happen to me is whenever I see a really cool RV, I'm like, "That's so cool. That's such a compelling lifestyle. I should get an RV, and then I could have that lifestyle." And then, "Oh, a squirrel." And then I completely forget about the existence of RVs until until the next time I see an RV because I don't actually want that, I guess. Or, it's interesting. It's just like it never stays in my brain long enough to be seriously considered. It does feel almost magical. It's funny that King points this out because you feel like, yeah, it's just impossible to keep thinking about RVs for more than 30 seconds.
Yeah. Do you think you'd want to actually do that though? Like retire? I feel like if you had asked me 20 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. There's no instance in which I'm like spending my retirement years driving around the country in an RV. And I feel like every year I'm a little bit more like, I could do that.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think basically, like, I see the appeal of it is one way to put
Yeah.
it. Would I actually do it? It's like, man, I really like my habits.
Yeah.
I
But
like
like
wake
I guess like once you're retired, like
Uh-huh.
how many of those habits are going to be your habits, I guess is the thing.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think like one thing to say is like I've literally one time like rented a relatively small RV and gone on a short duration trip with it, and it's not luxury.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it would have been nicer if it were a nicer RV, but like contrast that with waking up in your nice, large, comfortable bed and then getting, coffee from your large, well-stocked refrigerator or whatever. Like, it just doesn't compare. So, and that can be fine. I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's hardship either. It's just like, um, it's I think the reason why I have never really seriously considered it is I quickly start thinking about the reality of it rather than the uh, fantasy, and then it stops
Sure.
feeling quite so appealing.
That's no fun though.
I
Don't
know.
just don't do that.
I
And
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
just like, wouldn't it be nice to just kind of drive around and see the country and read and watch movies? And it's like, but Scott, where are you going to put all the books and movies? Shush, shush, shush. They're there.
In the RV, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this detail, Matt, that we see here, that the True Knot call regular people rubes. It's just this wonderfully dismissive, kind of different name.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels kind of old fashioned, right? And
Yeah.
it connects to the idea that they're like, they're all super old actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it, I don't know if this is kind of random, but we get kind of hints about how various members of the True Knot are really old, right? And maybe kind of a little hint about who they are, maybe from their appearance.
Mm-hmm.
But Rose the Hat is consistently just a complete enigma to us, even though we sometimes get a perspective from her.
Yeah.
We see inside her mind. The book is just absolutely uninterested in showing us who she was, and I think that's intentional. I think it's because it's like it doesn't matter. She's the leader of the True Knot. That's who she is now. Whatever she was before is dead.
Yeah, it's a reflection of, I think, her view on the past, essentially. She doesn't care. Yeah. I love this statement as well. America is a living body. The highways are its arteries, and the True Knot slips among them like a silent virus.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. We've talked so much in so many books about this America conceptually as like the driving across America, the highway thing, and in Gaiman's American Gods, this was a forefront idea, and also in The Stand a little bit, and I think King has written about this a lot. This our massive highway system, and like the fact that people drive on them so often while still remaining in the country is like a unique America thing that sure no other place has, but it is very specifically American.
Yeah, that's kind of the meme, is that we will drive hundreds of miles for, a weekend trip that would be in many other places. You would be leaving the country if you drove hundreds of miles in any direction. So, not that America is the largest country, but it may be something like the best combination of a large country with a lot of interconnected roads, and that's what makes it that way.
Yeah. So we pick up with the True Knot virus in 2011. Abra is now 10. Dan is 10 years sober. And please note here that we're now 150 pages into the novel and still have not caught up to present day. We're still 2 years away from that. So, we're getting there slowly.
Yeah, we'll get there.
So Crow Daddy is bringing news to Rose the Hat that another of their members has died, has cycled out. See, what we learn here, Matt, is the True Knot don't live forever, just, for a very long time. And the less steam they eat, the more likely they are to succumb to life, in a way. The True Knot are in a bit of a transition period we see here now. They're not used to getting colds. They never got colds before, but suddenly they're getting colds. They're susceptible to human illnesses. And as Crow Daddy points out, there's also seems to be less steam. I love this quote here. There used to be more steam, Crow said. Don't be daft. That's like the Rube saying that 50 years ago people were more neighborly. It's a myth, and I don't want you spreading it around. People are nervous enough already. You know me better than that, and I don't think it is a myth, darling. If you think about it, it stands to reason. 50 years ago, there was more of everything. Oil, wildlife, arable land, clean air. There was even a few honest politicians. Okay. I just want to say that I don't think that last sentence was true. I don't think there have ever been honest politicians, ever.
That was also a myth, yeah.
Yeah. But I do like this idea. I wanted to talk to you about this because I think this is something that is reflected in Stephen King's universe, right? This idea that if steam is the shine and shine is magic, then it's this Stephen King idea that there's less magic in the world, that magic is leaving the world. And I think that's a true statement in The Dark Tower. And it's a true statement across a lot of King's stories, that there are less special magical people in the world today than there were yesterday, 10 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah, just due to natural processes, and also he often draws this dichotomy of like technology versus magic, and the more technology there is, the less magic there is. And like this sort of project of rationalization that happens to the world. It's It's a thing we've seen before.
I don't know if the air was cleaner 50 years ago.
That's a good point. The air was probably literally dirtier.
I mean, 50 years ago was the 70s, right? And notoriously like pollution heavy the 70s. And like, look, we've done a lot of bad stuff to our environment, and we have a lot of work to do to reverse a lot of it. But there are some instances in which the people of Earth have like stood up and said, "Hey, we're doing bad things," and we fixed them. Like the hole in the ozone got fixed,
Yeah.
right? Because we all said, "Hey, these aerosol cans we're using are throwing all these really harmful chemicals up into the air." And like humanity said, "Okay, we're just all going to stop doing that." And we did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also we took lead out of gasoline, which,
Yeah.
even if we're burning more gasoline now, it's not spewing aerosolized lead
Yeah.
into our brains and just,
That is not to say that we aren't in an environmental crisis, right? I want to be clear on that. I think like climate change is a real thing that's happening. But I think this specific idea of like 50 years ago, everything was peachy and now it's not, I think is more complicated than what Crow was saying here.
Well, it's interesting because there's a subtext to the conversation, right? Which is like, we are running out of steam. We meaning we could run out of steam.
Yeah.
Like it almost seems childishly simple, but neither of them wants to say, what if we just can't find steam anymore? What if this is just it? Because I think it seems like the True Knot has, for many, many years, had this attitude of, we're just going to keep going along, and there will always be more steam, and we will get to live basically forever. And obviously, they know that's not quite true because some of them die. But it's like, well, that guy over there died, and he was like really old, and I'm Snakebite Andy, or I'm Rose the Hat. There's no like, it's unimaginably distant, and thus I don't have to think about it. But
Yeah.
the underlying fact is that these people are terrified of death. They're far more frightened of death. In contrast, of course, with like the thing that Dan is doing, where he's helping people not be frightened of death.
Yeah. And I think as we learn more, we learn that this is even more dire than anyone realizes, right? They have these canisters that store steam in cases where they can't get it from children. And we learn that there are only 3 canisters left. Their thing holds 40 canisters, which means at one point they probably had 40 full canisters, and Rose only has 3 left. A fact that she is keeping from the rest of them. And like, like this idea that I love what you said of like they're dying and no one like she even the book like very casually, because like we're in Rose's perspective, mentions that there used to be 200 members of the True Knot, and now they're down to like 45 or 50. And so like people are dying in this infinite world, and their numbers are reduced. This is like Scientology, in that they have a lot of money, but there's only like 6 of them left, because everyone's either been murdered or left the church. Please don't sue me, Scientology. I was just kidding about that.
In Minecraft.
Yeah, thank you. But like, they're just like, they're like, I love how it says the True's back wasn't to the wall, not quite yet, but it was inches away. I wanted to take this moment to relate this to alcoholism a little bit, because you constructed this metaphor last week that I thought was great. This idea of steam as alcohol, and these are people that subsist on this this tonic to live. So can we equate this kind of slow diminishing of steam in the world and this like these people's lives becoming worse and worse over time to alcoholism? I think we can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're addicts, and their addiction has stripped out everything of any meaning. They are living entirely for the thing they're addicted to. In some ways, it's interesting because he's, as a metaphor, he has stripped out, I think, the parts that are uninteresting to him in this context, which is like the inebriation. Actually, that's not entirely true. They get high. They get high from
Yeah,
the
when they
steam.
take the steam, they get
Yeah.
drunk off it, essentially. Yeah.
They get drunk off it. They enjoy it, and then it takes away their souls, right? It's a devil's bargain. They sell their souls for, pleasure, and then what turns out to not even be all that much longevity because they're dropping like flies. We don't get hard numbers on this, but I feel like, you get to live 150, 200 years maybe if you're in the true knot, which is, I could be off by, a factor of 2, but I feel like even that is stretching it, and that's not forever. That's uh
Yeah.
and again, you're living this life that's like not really that enjoyable except for these moments where you get to take your drug.
Yeah, it does seem like a pretty miserable existence, especially when we learn what they have to do to get their drug,
Hmm.
for sure. Um,
Yeah.
so Rose has decided they're going to take a canister, one of the 3 remaining ones, to help the rest of the surviving members of the True Knot survive. We see that Snakebite Andy makes the owners of the RV campground go to sleep, and the True gathers to collect steam. I just want to point something out that I thought was interesting. Like, Snakebite Andy, obviously we see has a very negative opinion about men due to the things that she suffered. We see this RV owner, and she basically says, "You like little girls, don't you? Like, you're this type of guy that like really really likes you, this disgusting man that likes little girls." And when he makes her go to sleep, she makes him go to sleep, she makes him dream of little girls
Mhm.
sexually. And it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but like, did he? Like, it's very possible that like there's lots of scumbag Stephen King characters in all his stories, right? And this could just be another. He's just an RV owner who is secretly this scumbag pedophile, right? But like, we don't see anything that actually gestures to that outside of that's what Andy assumes,
Yeah.
and that's what that Air Force Andy puts into his head when she sends him to sleep, which is, I mean, like, this is just her view on people, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's just her being twisted, right?
Yeah,
And incapable of growth or change past the point where she was essentially killed and replaced with a vampire version of herself.
yeah, yeah. So as they consume the soul of a little boy that was murdered over 10 years ago, the True Knot are invigorated. I think King is definitely channeling some hedonism here, right? There is like, it's getting drunk and partying. Essentially,
Mm.
they also get really horny and fuck a lot. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on here related to that.
So a passing thought I had was that if we're going to make a metaphor and try to really squeeze it might be closer to cocaine than alcohol because
Fair.
it kind of makes them high in that almost like manic and sexual way. Not that people don't get horny on alcohol, but they also tend to just like pass out. It's not really what we're seeing. And there was also a moment where I might have edited my memory here, but I felt like it was like the first time that they took steam, or the first time that Snakebite Andy took steam, or maybe it was just the first night that she was turned, was like the most high she ever got. And that's kind of always a thing you hear about cocaine. It's a little it's also in King's books that it's like the first time you take cocaine, you're never going to reach that high again, and you're going to chase that high, and that's part of the danger of cocaine is you're trying to feel as good as you did that first time.
Yeah.
So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's
I,
jumped out to me. Yeah.
I think that works. I mean, we construct the metaphor for alcoholism specifically because that's such a presence in the other story in the book. But I think a general addiction and substance abuse metaphor works just as effectively. Yeah.
Yeah, just I'm not gonna argue that it's definitely one or the other. I just had that passing thought. So
Hmm. Yeah. All right. So, later in July, we kind of learn a little bit how the True Knot identifies their victims, right? Basically, they'll be driving around, and just like Snakebite Andy has the power to make people go to sleep. Some of them just have the power of sensing other people that are heavy with steam or the shine. They basically just get pings in their head of like general like almost like echolocation. And we see here in this moment that they got one. It's Bradley Trevor, the baseball boy. He is a young baseball player that's walking home from the game. He's feeling a little bit off and funny and not quite himself. So when the True Knot shows up and offers him a ride, he just says, "Yeah, sure," and hops in the van. And then we move on to a very brutal scene to end the chapter.
Yeah. I knew this was coming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It sucked. Honestly, it didn't suck as much as I thought it would, because the scene in the text is actually shorter than I was afraid it would be. I mean, we still understand very well what's happening, but we're not asked to visualize it in too much detail.
Yeah.
It's well, it's left to our imagination, which in some ways can be worse, but King is he doesn't drag us through the mud too much. So
yeah, it's thankfully short. It's less than a page, but it is really intense because it turns out Matt, that it's not just killing a person and drinking their soul or their power. It tastes better if they're in extreme pain. Cool. So the True Knot tortures Bradley very, very slowly, cutting him again and again and again. And while the text is short, Bradley's death is not. I found this quote particularly impactful to me. The boy lasted a long time. He screamed until his vocal cords ruptured and his cries became husky barks.
Yeah. It's rough.
It is rough. Starting to think these are bad guys. Very bad guys.
I'm not fond of them anymore.
You were totally on board with the RV life, with the drinking of the steam, with the driving out to New Jersey on 9/11 and just drinking it all in.
Yeah, just a bunch of guys and gals being bros and hanging out. Thought this was America.
I'm glad you draw your line at child torture and murder, though. It's good to know you've got standards.
I do have a line.
Yeah, great. All right, Matt, the final chapter of the week, chapter 6, titled Weird Radio. This chapter catches us with Abra, who we basically cut to her right after the events of poor little Bradley Trevor. She had a horrible, horrible dream about the, quote, baseball boy being murdered. Her parents now fully understand that Abra is special, refer to this thing that happens every so often as the weird radio in her head. And I love this because Abra tells her mom that she thinks she told her invisible friend Tony about the baseball boy, and that she hopes that Tony will relay that information to his daddy. And we're left to go, whoa. Kind of crazy.
Yeah. It's funny how this book takes our assumptions of what exactly Tony is and throws him in the trash can.
Sort of. I want to talk to you about that in a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think sort of.
Okay.
But sort of not.
Okay.
Depending on what is your source for Tony information.
Okay.
I did have a quick question for you with this scene, though, because you're a father of people that are 10 or older. Yes. Does Abra sound like a 10-year-old to you in this scene? Because she did not sound 10 to me. She sounded much younger than that to me. I have not been around a 10-year-old in a long time, though. So
yeah, I mean, my kids straddle 10. I have a 9-year-old who actually just turned 9, and she is much more articulate than this character. I think it's quite blunt to be blunt. This character sounds much younger than 10. Especially since Abra is meant to come off as really precocious and smart.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying she didn't know what a hospice was. Okay, I don't think my 9-year-old knows what a hospice is either, but it's more in the I don't know, just
it's the sentence construction and the vocabulary used, I think. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. I mean, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old doesn't speak like an adult, but they speak, fully grammatical and complex sentences.
Yeah. If I was maximum charitable view here, she's just woken up from like a horrible, horrible, terrible nightmare, and
Mhm.
so she might be like projecting as a bit more babyish in those moments, because she's
Sure.
just witnessed a horrible ordeal that she's like allowing herself to uh, pose and project as more childish, because she wants her mommy.
Sure.
But I still like definitely like had this feeling reading the section that was like, nah, that feels like a 6 or 7 year old actually.
Yeah, I would say 6 or 7-year-old, but I don't know, I mean, I like to give things the benefit of the doubt. I like the idea that maybe she's just kind of in a compromised state.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
cut back to the True Knot, and Rose explains to Crow Daddy that they had a looker when they were killing the Bradley boy. This of course is Abra. She wasn't just dreaming, Matt. She was actually there in some magical sense. And the True Knot has now sniffed her out here. Fortunately, they're not going to act on this yet. They're going to wait for her to ripen a bit, which is it's a gross way of saying that.
Yeah.
Um, so the first thing I wanted to mention here is this idea that Abra, is like against in a world of contrasts. She contrasts her Dan doing this incredibly kind, wonderful thing for this man to the True Knot doing this incredibly brutal, terrible thing to a young person. Just like she's got to witness the use of special powers to do great and terrible things.
Yeah. Both of them having to do with death, of course.
Yep, yep. Do you think like I think this is one of those moments where I'm like, is this book kind of structurally weird? Because we've talked about King likes to take his time before he gets to the plot, and I think that's fine. I think it's fine. And I love how we get to characterize the True Knot again with the idea of waiting for her to ripen, because they don't even see her as a person. She's a meal.
Mhm.
I do think it's a bit interesting to at this moment be like, we found the solution to our problem, and the solution to our problem is this girl who we think is one of the most powerful steamheads that we've ever sensed. In a world of diminishing steam, here's this incredibly, incredibly powerful steamhead, and it's like, should we go get her? Nah, we're gonna wait a couple years. We're gonna wait for the plot to catch up with contemporary times, the book's publishing date, and then we'll and then we'll initiate
Uh-huh.
project do the story of the book. I'm mostly being the devil's advocate here. Like I don't find this that much of a problem for me, but I thought about it while reading, and I wanted your take.
Well, it's interesting because I totally see what you mean about it feeling like an unrealistic choice, considering that their back is, you know, not quite up against the wall, but almost up against the wall, and yet they're kind of playing, choosing to slow play this opportunity. But I don't think I felt that way at the time. I mean, I
Sure,
think what I felt at the time when I was listening was something like, okay, we're having the stakes really clarified for us. I like to think of stakes in terms of um, clarifying what I'm supposed to care about and why. You know,
sure,
what are we worried about? Okay, we're worried about the True Knot finding and eating Abra, and now we're even more worried about it because they have a ping, that they have a sense of where she is. Why are we worried about it? Because she's a lovable child, and we have come to like her and like her family members and love the connection that she has with Dan. So there's an actual dramatized connection there that's important. Something many authors forget is the part where you make me care. Uh, when are we worried about it? So we said what, we said why. Now we say when. Well, we're only a little worried about it right now, but it's in the back of our minds. The seed has been planted because if Dan doesn't get in position to protect Abra or play some role in this, then they're just going to eat her. It might be 2 years later, but they're just going to find her and they're going to kill her. So it adds a kind of ticking clock element. That's the
Mhm.
when. So we have what, why, when. I'm sure you could add all kinds of other things, but I like to think about it this way because I think a lot of authors are like they play too coy with this stuff. Like the fact that I was able to so concisely explain the stakes is
Mhm.
extremely important to the functioning of a novel.
Sure.
There's so many novels we've read where I'm like, I don't. What do you want me to be caring about right now? You know, and that's something
Yeah.
that King never fails to do properly.
No, completely fair. Yeah, I like it from that viewpoint a lot. And of course I am like always going to be okay with King taking his sweet time because
Hmm.
I just find the stuff that isn't even plot so captivating anyway.
Hmm.
That I'm for it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just
Well,
wanted to bring it up.
I would even, just to say, like, the reason we care about Abra, the reason we care about Dan is because of the slow, him getting to play on the train in the town center, which is not plot central or not plot central yet anyway. But
Yeah.
it's that's why we actually care. That's why we
Yeah.
actually read the book. So
Yeah. Yeah. I do love this little bit of it though, because as they're kind of reasoning, can we wait? Do we need to take her now? One of the things that Rose says about Abra is her parents probably don't know what she is or what she can do. Even if they do, they're probably minimizing it like hell in their own minds so they don't have to think about it too much. And I just love this because that is just wrong. That is just flat out wrong.
mhm.
And that's like their reflection of that matches the way it used to be. You know, we talked last week about Dan's parents' reaction to his shine versus Abra's parents' reaction to her shine, and we tied that to this kind of interesting evolution and perhaps culture and society and in how we look at these things. I tried to build a metaphor of just how we talk about maybe mental health or how we talk about how people are doing and feelings and ideas, and we don't try to just shove them down and not talk about them or not think about the things that make us uncomfortable. We face them more often is an increasing trend in our culture. And I do think this is a reflection of that. And it's really interesting to me that Rose is just wrong about this, that
Mhm.
she thinks that um, her parents have no idea, or if they do have an idea they're not dealing with it, and she's wrong. And it is interesting to think maybe the way in which she's Rose is wrong about this is going to ultimately be part of their undoing at the end of the book, maybe.
I hadn't thought about this, but I love this. It relates to that kind of internal monologue the doctor had last week, where he was thinking about nature versus nurture and all these things. And it's like because Rose is so disconnected and it's almost a woman out of time in some ways. She's just not clued in to kind of what the nurture is like in the
Yeah.
2010s
Yeah.
or
A-
2000s.
And I mean, like, I think it's kind of safe to extrapolate a situation where the True Knot succeeds in their kidnapping and murder and torture of children in a world in which people don't like to admit that those children have special power. Like you can like you wonder how many instances there was where a little boy or a little girl like felt some sixth sense about the True Knot coming to get them, ran and told their parents, and their parents dismissed them as being ridiculous or whatever, or just didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to think about it because they don't like. And it seems like the True Knot probably lives and benefits off of that relationship, and that is like the steam going away in general. That is a thing that is changing in the world, and the True Knot don't see these people as people. They don't care about them as people. And so they don't or can't see this kind of changing dynamic in society because they're kind of stuck in their ways in a very
Yep.
specific kind of way.
which is which is one of the reasons why I think King thinks that living your allotted time and then dying is not a bad thing.
Yeah. All right, so we catch up with Dan, who is meeting with Casey. It seems that even after 10 years, Casey is still a bit of a hard ass as a sponsor. But of course, maybe that's exactly why Dan has made it 10 full years of sobriety, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I also enjoy that we see some signs that Casey has aged, despite
Mm-hmm.
remaining a hard ass, kind of a formidable presence. But he has aged. He's physically aged.
Yeah.
Important thing to point out in this book, where we have in contrast the True Knot, who have changed practically none in that time frame. But his aging is accompanied with a kind of dignity, because he has helped Dan through he's accomplished all these good things with his life. And yes, he's getting older, but look at the meaning that has accompanied that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love this ritual they go through here. It says, "Now tell me why you drank. Because I'm a drunk. Not because mommy didn't give you no love? No. Wendy had had failings, but her love for him and his for her had never wavered. Because daddy didn't give you no love? No. Although once he broke my arm and at the end he almost killed me. Because it's hereditary? No." Dan sipped his coffee. "But it is. You know that, right?" "Sure. I also know it doesn't matter. We drank because we're drunks. We never get better. We get a daily reprieve based on our spiritual condition. And that's it." I love this, Matt. I love this so much because, like, I think there's such a difference between how people perceive diseases like this and how the person actually living with the disease has to live with it. Because from a perspective of you're trying to teach people to be more understanding of this disease, your situation as a child, the hereditary part of it, all these things matter a whole bunch, right? If you're trying to make people and society and culture understand that alcoholism is not just a person just fucking their lives up continuously, but it's a disease. It's a disease like any other disease. All these things are super important. But to the guy who's trying to make it from morning until night without taking a drink, none of that shit matters. It doesn't matter that this comes from your childhood and what your dad almost did to you, and also just the thing your dad passed to you in his blood. That doesn't fucking matter. What matters right now is you and the drink and you staying away from it, and that is all up to you. That is all. And I love this is just a simple way of really defining this concept, that this is going to be a book that maybe talks about Dan's past, and we see here in a little bit we learn why Dan drank the first time, but ultimately, like, that doesn't matter towards the work of getting better. It matters to understand how he got himself in the situation in the first place, but it doesn't help him get better. And I think this is just a great, very simple way of making that kind of declarative statement.
I love everything you just said there. It's interesting because I find like the AA sort of shtick just seems incredibly harsh. Like I feel like if somebody's, if I had this problem and somebody said this to me, I would be like, oh fuck you, like I'm not a drunk. I'm not a drunk, but like that's I think that it's tough love, and it's an approach that obviously works for some people. So
Yeah.
I'm not actually criticizing it. I'm just sort of I enjoy your reaction, and I think it's funny. My reaction was a lot more like, "Don't talk to me that way," like kind of vicariously for the character. But Dan accepts it. Dan, this is what works for him. So
Yeah, sure. I mean, I thankfully do not have a drinking problem, but I do wonder some days, like, if I did have a drinking problem, how difficult this kind of thing would be for me. Because I agree with you. I am not like there are lots of people that learn and take criticism and are pushed in various ways. Like, when I played sports as a kid, I was not like there are lots of people in sports that, like, if the coach comes up and screams in your face, that's motivating.
mm-hmm.
Like that is the way to motivate you to run faster, work harder, whatever. That's not me. That's not me. When people run up and scream in my face, I shrink down and run away.
Yeah.
So that was never a motivating factor for me. And the coaches I liked in sports as a kid and a teenager were the kind that did not do that. And so there is part of me that wonders, if I had this problem, would this specific method work on me? I think eventually, like, I don't know. I don't want to speak about something I have absolutely no experience in whatsoever, but I think the strategy makes sense here, that you have to be honest with yourself that you fucked up.
Yeah.
and you're killing yourself.
Yeah, the part of it I think that is surprising, and it honestly surprising to someone who is not in this world, is like, okay, but you've been sober for 12 years or whatever it is. So do we still need to do we still need to do this? Like, I can imagine, like, me being in Dan's position, I can imagine being like, all right, for the first year, it made sense for us to go through this catechism. For the first 5 years, I tolerated it. On year 12, I'm good, man. I'm good. But like me saying that, I acknowledge is like confessing my ignorance, because like literally in this chapter, Dan feels that compulsion to go get a drink. So
Yeah.
he's doing this because he knows that he still needs it and that he always will. And that's actually kind of what I need to be reminded of as like the reader who doesn't have these insights. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that "we never get better" line is ultimately a defense mechanism of like,
mhm.
if we ever get to a place where we're like, beat it,
Yeah.
done,
Yeah.
then that's when it can fucking get you.
Yep.
So this idea of doing this day in and day out for 10 years, for infinity years, for
Mhm.
as long as you're alive, allows you to kind of constantly keep your guard up against this thing that can really sneak up on you. So,
Yep.
yeah. So Casey then switches tracks. He dives into Dan's personal life. He starts basic, asking about his dating life, which we learn is basically non-existent. He like had a thing with the waitress that's at the diner right now, and also with the nurse that worked at the hospice, but she's moved. But that's it. Basically, nothing else. He's not really seeking any kind of romantic companionship.
Mhm.
And then Casey pushes a little further. He asks about what Dan actually does for the hospice. He knows that he helps people die, but no one seems to know any of the details beyond that. And Casey admits that he's bringing this up because he feels that what this is doing, what Dan is doing for these people, is part of his making amends. But the question is, for what?
Mhm.
You see, good old Dr. Sleep hasn't yet to reveal to Casey or to anyone what his rock bottom was. That is the one secret that he's kept, and he's keeping it still. And even just thinking about that secret makes him want to drink.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a strong echo of Luke's fearless moral inventory from Haunting of Hill House. I suspect we're drawing from the same well.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've I think we've identified the core of what Dan's personal character arc is going to be. Is he needs to have that confrontation with himself, and he needs to admit that to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And we will see. We will see where that goes. So Dan gets back to his apartment. He finds Abra's chalkboard message waiting for him. Or well, let's be clear here. Abra reached out to Tony, not to Dan.
Mhm.
Tony, who is, quote, a deeper and wiser version of himself. So this is the part that I want to talk to you about Tony a little bit here, Matt, because yeah, Tony, in the context of The Shining, the book, was seen as a boy that would come talk to Danny. I think even in that book, by the end of that book, he's realized that Tony is himself.
Mhm.
It's his way of channeling his power through a physical, not physical, but a presence, a caricature, in order to understand what his brain is doing that he doesn't fully understand it yet.
Mhm.
And he points out that the interesting idea that Abra did a similar thing with Tony. Abra reached out like unknown and pinged off of Dan and recognized Tony in some part of Dan, this construct he made for himself, and that's the person she feels most comfortable talking with, because that's a kid, not an adult. And that's what she does. So the reason I bring this up is because I wanted to talk briefly about the 1990s Shining miniseries that Stephen
Sure.
King wrote, in which it is revealed at the very end that Tony was actually just Danny all grown up, that his
Mhm.
name is Daniel Anthony Torrance.
Mhm.
And so that's who Tony was the whole time. Like, we see Tony in the miniseries version of The Shining, and he's just a grown up character that's saying, "Look out, Danny! Don't go in there."
Yeah.
And that's just Daniel, and that's the reveal. We've basically, King has like non-canonized that version of The Shining, even though he wrote it in
Uh-huh.
this book. But I think that is one thing he carries over. Like, I don't think there's never a moment in Stephen King's The Shining, I think, where we say his full name is Daniel Anthony Torrance. We go, oh, that's where the Tony comes from. I don't think we ever do that, but he's brought that over from the
Yeah.
90s miniseries he wrote.
Yeah, I don't remember if we mentioned his middle name in the book or not, but in any case, yeah, I like that connection. I do think we have left aside the idea that it's a time traveling Danny from the future because I mean, honestly, it's like it introduces an entirely narratively unnecessary grandfather paradox, where it's just like don't let's not do that. That's not called for here.
Sure.
Um, but I like. Yeah, I guess the thing that's sticking out to me about the whole Tony situation in this book is like the fact that Tony can have just totally independent conversations with totally separate people like Abra is surprising. Like if it really is just like sort of Dan having a conversation with his own power, that's one thing. But it's like, well, then Tony goes and hangs out with Abra, and that's you know outside of Dan's awareness, like that's an interesting new wrinkle about what Tony is.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how I actually read it in the story. Like I guess my read on it was just that Abra is talking to this presence she pings off of and feels every once in a while,
Mm,
and it's represented to her as Tony.
I see.
Um, and she's like, I guess I never thought. I mean, I might be flat out wrong here. I never thought that like Abra is interacting and interfacing with Tony exactly like Dan used to. But maybe we're supposed to take that. I don't know. I don't know.
Now that you say that, I realize that I jumped to a conclusion pretty egregiously. So I just think you're right. I think it's more like she is when she looks at Danny, she sees Tony. Is maybe a more
Yeah,
accurate way of saying. Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's just
and
right.
she's aware enough to understand that there's another presence there. I think part of that is that she actually physically witnessed Dan help with Charlie's death.
Hmm.
So like, it's just in her child mind, she perceives that as, oh, that must be Tony's dad.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and I think one thing that's just going to happen as she continues to grow older, is those ideas are just going to meld, and she's just going to realize, oh, this is just Dan,
yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so Dan heads out to see his old friend and mayor of teeny town, Billy Freeman. But when he gets there, Matt, he sees flies crawling on Billy's face. And we know what that means. They're death flies. And I love this moment where he relates this immediately to something we didn't realize yet. We know Wendy had died, but we didn't know this, that
Hmm.
he saw death flies on Wendy's face. And the writing here is, Dan remembered visiting his mother 9 months before her death, on the day which she had also claimed to feel fine, in the pink, absolutely tickety-boo. What are you looking at, Danny? Wendy Torrance had asked. Have I got a smudge? She had swiped comically at the tip of her nose, her finger passing right through the hundreds of death flies that were covering from chin to hairline. Like a call.
Yeah. Like a call. The book is great for these little rhymes, by the way.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's
Um,
interesting that when King, like the ways in which King calls direct attention to the rhymes. I'm thinking back in last week to when he has uh, Dick's question to Danny
mhm,
about do you care perfectly echo in Rose's question to Andy. But in that moment, he had to like stop the book and say like, remember?
mhm,
It's like when Dick said it to Dan.
mhm.
And then this one he just leaves it and like knows you're gonna make the connection yourself. I wonder like what goes into the moment to moment decision making process where in one he felt like I need to clearly draw a solid line, and in this one he's like confident that a dotted line would
Yeah.
be enough.
I think maybe it's because in the first instance, he's drawing our attention to the fact that he's gonna do this, and
Oh
then
yeah, that's fair.
that makes him more confident that he can just get away like, do it, and maybe you'll notice, or hopefully you'll notice.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's fair.
that's great.
But Billy, fortunately, Matt only has a few death flies, which in Dan's experience gives him plenty of time to help correct the issue. At first, Billy refuses to get a checkup, but when Dan brings in Casey and Dr. John on it, he finally gives in. He gets a CT scan, which reveals an aneurysm the size of a ping pong ball in Billy's aorta. So Dan has just saved his life, fortunately.
I'm having a hard
Um,
time visualizing that, but
that's
good.
big. That's
Yeah.
big, man. Ping pong balls. That's a
Like,
big aneurysm.
is it like on the outside of the aorta? Like, how does that physiologically look? I don't really understand.
I don't know, man.
Doesn't matter, I guess. I guess it's just we
Not
get the point. I
I'm
just
not
found
a
it difficult.
doctor.
I'm not. I know what the aorta is the thing. So I'm like, but like where? But anyway, I'm sure there's an answer. I'm not actually nitpicking this. I just don't know what it would look like. Yes, very cool.
Yeah.
The book also kind of points out to us that the people in the hospice never have the death flies, even though they're
Yeah.
way more on death's door than these people.
Mhm.
Than Billy and his mom. And the book. I think the book points that out, but then just kind of leaves us with it.
Yeah,
And
it introduces this really interesting thing, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Is this, this is a book in which Dan's role here is to usher people to the end of their lives. Um, like you said, this is Stephen King talking about the natural order of things, right? That death is this inevitability, and it's a thing that's going to happen. And Dan serves as to be that you know uh River Styx driver. What's
yeah,
his name? I'm
Karen.
blanking on. Thank you. Um, that is Dan's purpose. And then we have, what is he doing here? Well, he's directly interceding in someone's death, in what one could say is the natural order.
Mm,
But I think that's why the book is doing this, right? I think the death flies signal in some way a disruption of the natural order in a
mm,
way that we don't feel we don't feel like it's upsetting the apple cart of the
yeah,
theme here.
something like a premature death versus a.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? It's totally. Um, damn it! It's insomnia again.
Yeah.
It's the shitty little doctor guy versus the nice ones.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, this will be gibberish to people who haven't read that book, but it's and I don't want to spoil it either. But like, there's deaths due to randomness and chaos, and kind of something being inflicted on you by the personified chaos of the universe, and then there's deaths of order, where it's like you're an orderly creature, and part of that order is to grow old and die, and so there's no intercession. Um, it's exactly the thing from
Yeah.
Insomnia.
That's wonderful. I hadn't even thought of that, but you were absolutely correct there. That's great. I love that. So Billy tries to thank Dan for saving his life and says he owes him one, but Dan disagrees, and we get this moment, Matt. Dan thought of how he descended the steps of an interstate bus 10 years ago, stepping into a snow flurry as fine as wedding lace. He thought of his delight when he had spotted the bright red locomotive that pulled the Helen Rivington. Also, how this man had asked him if he liked the little train, instead of telling him to get the fuck away from what he had no business touching. Just a small kindness, but it had opened the door to all he had now. Billy boy, I'm the one who owes you, and more than I could ever repay. Just like, just
Yeah, it,
warms your heart, man.
that bit made me emotional there, because
Mhm.
it makes you love Dan even more than you already did.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's ultimately the purpose, right? We think about, from a storytelling perspective, from a plot perspective, like, what does the story do to our plot, right? Does this is kind of just a day in the life moment for Dan. Like, this is what he does essentially. Like, he uses his power to help usher people on, but if he sees his friends or the people he cares about, his loved ones, he acts on their behalf
Mm,
to help them, whether it's find someone's watch or find someone's ping pong size aneurysm in their heart.
yeah, yeah, it's great.
So, despite everything going super well for him, on the way home from the hospital, Danny drives by a bar and suddenly feels the almost irresistible urge to go in and nosedive off the wagon. I love the way King writes about all this, Matt. We talked about the experience that he's gained over the years, and I think this is him using this specific experience. The way the urge and temptation to drink can come out of nowhere. Like I love the idea that on the bad days, the days that you think you being an outside observer that is not suffering from this thing, think, oh, I bet it's hardest for an alcoholic to not drink on a really bad day. And what the book is saying is, no, actually, it's maybe you kind of gird yourself against it because but it's the days that sneak up on you, the days where everything is going well and suddenly you just see a bar or see a beer and then bam, you're in it. I love that idea. I love that he's brought it into Danny here, and I love this picture he paints of breaking your sobriety being simultaneously a horror and a relief. Like this line here, he felt good about this. He also felt like a man who had just put a loaded gun to his temple, right? And it's both things at the same time, that you can exist in both of these states at the same time, where what you're doing is the worst possible thing you could do for yourself, but at the same time it feels like such a load off. It feels so good and so bad at the same time. It gets you into a mindset that I think us that are not suffering from this thing fully understand, but
Mm.
can empathize with at least.
I think even if you don't quote unquote have alcoholism, like you're familiar with, and if you're familiar with alcohol, like I mean even literally alcohol, like you can think like, oh, that drink's gonna feel so good, and I know what that feels like, even though I basically, never. It's funny. I basically am a complete teetotaler at this point in my life. But like it's because alcohol just causes such horrible negative, like immediate negative side effects for me, that it's not worth it. But which I almost see as a blessing, because like I can imagine a world where I don't get negative side effects from alcohol, and then I drink way more, which sounds like a worse world in many ways, actually.
Mm-hmm.
What was my point? I think my point was just like, even not being an alcoholic, I can empathize with that feeling of like you're holding the drink in your hand and you're simultaneously aware of the suffering you're about to cause, but also like, it's gonna feel so good though. It's gonna taste so good, I hope this kind of conversation isn't like triggering some subset of listeners who are like susceptible to this.
Yeah, I am not addicted to alcohol, but you know what I have? I have this. I have this. I'm holding up a cell phone for people listening on the audio. And you know what it's like to be addicted to a cell phone? What it's like is sometimes you're not even consciously aware that you just picked up your phone and pulled it out and are checking Twitter or your email or something, and you don't even realize it. And you're like, what the fuck?
Where'd that come from?
Yeah. And please note, I am not equating my stupid addiction to technology to alcoholism. I am not at all. I understand how much more serious one is than another, but like, I think we all have like temptation, and we all have like even if you're just like on a diet and you're like, I don't want to eat that cookie. It would be awful for me to eat that cookie.
Mm-hmm.
But also that cookie is going to be really, really good.
Yeah. Just compulsion and temptation, and but like you said,
not comparable in the extremity of it all.
Yeah. But I think if it wasn't a universal human thing, it wouldn't really work as a topic to write about, like we've got to be able to connect to it on some level.
Yeah, I mean, I think he knows that there is some innate humanity to compulsion and temptation and these things, while also knowing that like he has firsthand experience with this particular one, much more than a lot of people do.
Exactly.
So Dan is struggling and almost calls his sponsor, but decides that talking to Casey might just force him to talk about his rock bottom again, and decides not to. This is almost an incredibly consequential decision that could ruin his sobriety forever. Fortunately, Dan has one other name in his Rolodex that he's okay with calling, and he calls Dr. John instead. Whew.
Yeah. Thank God for Dr. John. We love Dr. John. He's become a very important character.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. We were just talking a minute ago about how Casey is such a hard ass and kind of has this very aggressive style, and which seems to have worked really well in general for Dan. But it seems like here it's like, well, now Casey is on the verge of crossing this line with Dan, where maybe that hard ass stance might have backfired. If like if it was a choice between talking about his rock bottom or taking a drink, he seemed to be on the verge of taking the drink.
Yeah.
So it was really good, like you just said. It's really good that he has Dr. John to fall back on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a way in which you could make that a critique of Casey's methods, but I also think like what Casey was getting at in his attempt to push Dan to reveal this stuff is that if you still have these things that you haven't come clean about to yourself and to others, these are poison in your well.
Yeah.
And when these urges come about, that poison could fuck you. And if he was if he was honest with Casey about his rock bottom, if he came clean about that thing, he would have nothing to hide. And therefore he would just be able to call Casey and say, I feel like drinking. But because he is keeping that, because he is not revealing that, now it is something that is between him and his sponsor. And now it is something that is making it so when he needs his sponsor the most, he feels like he cannot call him. And that is an incredibly dangerous place to be in. And yeah, it's lucky he has other people that can help him in these moments. Certainly.
Yep.
I love this so much. John, I feel like drinking. Oh no! John cried in a trembling falsetto. Not booze.
It's wonderful. It's so wonderful. I agree. It's like the perfect reaction because it just pops the gravity of the situation for both the character and for us, really, because the reading has become so dire, and then you're like, oh, you're right. It's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? And and then once he's kind of lightened the mood and removed some of this horrible gravity, then John works his way back around to talking about the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I love how John switches from that jokey kind of sing-song falsetto to when Dan tells him he's in the parking lot in front of a bar right now, then John is like suddenly switches to, okay, get the fuck out of there. Like he just goes full serious. He's not joking around anymore. Get in your car, drive out now. Do not hang up with me until you can't see that bar anymore. It's just like it is a great way to approach it, where these guys, like the part of I think the success of AA is that it is a group. It is a tight knit group of people that are all suffering from the same thing and that can lean on each other and know each other. And part of that kind of club nature of it is you can kind of all joke around about the things you're struggling with in a way that you can't really joke around with it about other people. Cause it's like, I think you just, an alcoholic, like making jokes about his alcoholism to non-alcoholics is just like going to be like, you're just going to make those people uncomfortable because they don't understand, but they can shoot the shit and joke around about this stuff all the time. But yeah, the second we're actually in danger, there's a big difference between I was sitting at home and suddenly I felt the urge to get a drink and I just wanted to call you to talk about it. There's a big difference between that and I'm at a bar right now. There's a drink in front of me and I'm calling you. Like, and at the second that John understands the scope of the call, he's like, okay, he goes into attack mode, basically. Get the fuck out of there. Get in your car. Go. It's great.
Yep. I love it.
I wanted to talk about this a little bit because in the efforts to get Dan to talk about it a little bit, Dan starts to think about the past, and we finally get to see, we prefaced this earlier, but we finally get to see this moment where we learn why Dan started drinking in the first place. It was kind of an unanswered question from last week's reading. And we see here, I'll read it and we can talk about it. He had promised both his mother and himself that he would never drink like his father. But when he finally began, as a freshman in high school, it had been such a huge relief that he had, at first, only wished he'd started sooner. Morning hangovers were 1,000 times better than nightmares all night long. All of which sort of led to a question. How much of his father's son was he? In how many ways? God, I love this. I love this so much. I love everything about this.
Yeah. It's interesting because it strikes me as the sort of thing where we were wondering, like, when did he start drinking? Why did he start drinking? And the book actually took a long time to just give us the answer in so many words, but it wouldn't have landed for us, I think, if we got it. If this was just how we met him and it was just explained to us. It's much better for us
Yeah.
to see it rather than have it
Yeah.
explained.
And you talked last week about the choice here to kind of, like, one thing King very often does is start us in media res, and then we backtrack to see how the character got in that position. And you talked about how we kind of didn't do that in this book a little bit. Like, we started at the beginning and then we worked our way up. But I what I love is that that's true generally, but there are still specific things that we did that exact thing with. And I think the question of when and why did Dan start drinking was one of those exact things. And now King does his very King thing where he puts us with it and then we reflect back on it here.
Yeah. I think we're gradually becoming aware that there is a dark zone between the last time that he talked to his mentor, whose
Dick.
name is
Dick Halloran.
And the beginning of the story,
Mhm.
because the stuff happened. Right? He started drinking.
Yeah.
His mom died. It was a dark time for him. We don't know much about it, so we're beginning to we're sort of beginning to fill in that zone too.
Yeah, and he lost, like, he did have his mentor, and his mentor helped him do this thing with the overlook ghosts.
Yeah.
But when did Dick die? When did Dick exit his life? Because
Yeah.
it seems like what he's struggling with here is his power is crescendoing, and he can't deal with it. It's too much. He's too strong. There's too much invading. It's a thing that's happening to Abra right now in a little bit, right? Like Abra wakes up a horrible dream of witnessing people murder a child and torture a child. Like, we can imagine that was happening to Dan over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And Dan had no one to talk to about it with, really. And Dan certainly didn't have a Dan for Abra to reach out to and say they killed the baseball boy. And like this is the distinction we're drawing, that thank God Abra has Danny.
That's a great point. I mean, it really interesting to consider how different Dan's life would have been if Dick Halloran had been around to give him advice to control it so that he didn't have to resort to alcoholism, because he probably had a whole bag of tricks, just like putting the ghosts in the boxes that he maybe didn't have time to pass along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the implication of that last sentence of this paragraph is that, like, perhaps the reason that Jack started drinking in the first place is because he was trying to quiet his power as well. I think we see enough of Jack's past in The Shining to know it's not quite that. It's mostly his terrible, horrible father.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit that.
Yeah, I think it's more subtext, but it's definitely there. The idea that Jack also has some amount of power, but that Danny, I think the way we play with it in the story is that Jack definitely has the power, but Danny has more of it. And when Jack realizes this just makes him incredibly jealous, because of how twisted he's become by that point in the story.
Yeah. I mean, like, the hotel wants them both, but the reveal that, hey, it actually wants Danny way more than you, Jack. It's just you're an easier get to get what it wants. Yeah. So we talked about this idea of Abra has Dan, where Dan didn't have anyone, and the absence of Dick. And I think this is actually a great moment to bring this up, because our chapter ends with Dan returning home to see another message from Abra on the board, basically a response to his message to her, where she says, "I had a wonderful day, your friend Abra." And his response is, "That's good, honey," Dan said. "I'm glad." And I love the use of honey there, talking back to what we were talking about, because honey is specifically the word that Dick called Danny when he was a kid. When he was, we saw this in the very first chapter of the book when we were talking through him trying to help him and be his mentor. He called him honey, and I remember this specifically because it pinged to me as like that's not, like, I probably would not. Like, I don't say honey to my son because I code that as more female in my head, even if it's true or not. But I do, like, I don't say honey. I say, I say sweetheart to my daughter. But I wouldn't say that to my son because it's just like it's weird,
Yeah.
ridiculous gender things. But that I'm just saying, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because that's why I clocked it when Dick said that to Dan when he was little, and now we see here that Dan is echoing that same sentiment. And I think what we're doing is we are trying to kind of consciously draw that connection, that link, obviously, of Dan was mentor, or Dick was mentor to Danny. Dan is now being that mentor teacher figure to Abra. Only hopefully he will stick around long enough to help her through those difficult times. Right about when she turns 12 or 13, which, hey, that's where we're going next, right?
Yep.
So yeah, the very end of the chapter is he didn't hear from Abra Stone for another 2 years, which advances Abra to be 12 on the cusp of 13, and advances Dan to 12 years sober.
Yeah.
And then we get this little line, which, like, is just kind of a very classic Kingism to just throw here at the end. During those same 2 years, something slept in the True Knot's bloodstream, a little parting gift from Bradley Trevor, aka the baseball boy. So I honestly can't remember if the movie has the same plot element, so I don't know whether I have to be coy with you or when I ask you, what do you think this is?
I think you do have to be coy because I don't remember this at all. It's funny. First, I'm just going to point out that this kind of is another, echo rhyme, because earlier we had America is a living body, the highways are its arteries, and the True Knot slips along them like a silent virus.
Yeah.
And here we echo the language of something slept in the bloodstream. It doesn't literally say it's a virus, right? Because it's almost certainly not. It's something magical. Undoubtedly, it's something magical from his steam. But maybe it's something that's accelerating their timetable, putting some pressure on them. That, like, some kind of spiritual, disease.
Sure.
A bad. What's the? I don't remember what the right drug lingo is for this, but a dose of the drug that has some of the wrong thing in it, and they're going to be in trouble. I have no idea, honestly.
They cut it with something bad, and
yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, so we'll just leave that at that for now, and see where it leads us. That, by the way, is the end of book 1 of the novel. I think this is a book. This is a book divided into 3 parts. That was part 1, Abra, that we just finished.
Okay, cool.
Part 2 begins next week. It's called Empty Devils. So do with that what you will.
I mean, that just sounds like a description of the True Knot.
Sure. Yeah. Could be.
Yep.
Not going to say.
Okay, great.
So yeah, next week we will begin part 2 of Dr. Sleep. We're reading chapters 7 through 9 of part 2, True Devils. So if you're reading along at home, make sure you read those 3 chapters and link back with us in a week. We have no answers to read because these 2 episodes were as we were finishing up Hill House. We're not asking questions, but we do have a new one to ask, right?
Yes, the discussion question for this week is: what is your favorite depiction of the struggle of sobriety?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of instances of this. You can do it at any level of. It does not have to be just like someone that it's 10, 7, 12 years into their sobriety struggling with it. It can be at any level. Let's talk about this. I think the book does a very good job depicting this, at least from my limited perspective. But what's your favorite depiction of this?
Yeah, I mean, writers are famously often alcoholics, and they often write about this subject. So it's
that's why I'll never make it as a writer.
Me too. All right. Remember, you can reach us via email at flanaganswakepod@gmail.com, or on X at flanaganswake19, or on Instagram at doofmedia. The subreddit where you should go answer that discussion question is reddit.com/r/doofmedia. Also, please don't forget that you can find every episode on YouTube. So you can comment, you could follow us on YouTube. We are here in video format, so check it out.
Yeah. This video is also available on Spotify. Obviously, these book episodes will have less of a visual component than our TV and movie episodes, but hey, you get to look at me.
Yeah.
and also Matt. Stop it. All right, if you want to check out some merchandise, please do. I had my Cup of Stars shirt. Oh, it's over in the kitchen. I can't get to it. But please head over to doofmedia.myshopify.com. There's a bunch of merchandise, mugs, shirts, awesome stuff across the board. I believe just today, Jody informed us that we have a brand new shirt and hat in honor of Dr. Sleep and The Shining.
Love it.
It just says Tuesday on it.
I should wear that to work on Tuesdays.
Yeah. It released today, which is a Wednesday, which is confusing.
But it's Tuesday.
I love Tuesday.
It. It's great.
You go into the office every Tuesday, so I think
That's
this
right.
should be your outfit.
It should be my Tuesday.
I am gonna buy one right now, and I'm gonna wear this to work on Tuesday and see what people say.
If they ask about it, what do you say? That you say like it's.
Speaking of which, one of my coworkers is great guy. Really like working with him. We're waiting for a meeting to start. We're sitting in a room, and he turns to me and goes, "Hey, I just finished watching this show. Have you ever heard of it? It's called The Haunting of Hill House." I was like, yeah, I think so.
I'm familiar.
He knows I do a podcast too. I just don't think he knew it was. He probably didn't know it was a Mike Flanagan show since he just watched it 6 years after it came out. 7 years.
Yeah.
Just a really, really great moment to me where I'm like, oh yeah, a little bit know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Worm? Yeah.
Spent 40 hours talking about it.
Yeah.
So check out that merch, doofmedia.myshopify.com.
Yeah. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. It's really easy to do that. I know a lot of people don't even do Patreon at all, but Patreon is just a cool platform. Actually, they're not paying me to do this. In fact, they're taking money out of my pocket, to be honest. But it's a cool platform because you can find all sorts of people doing interesting things, and then you support them, and in exchange for support, you get access to cool behind the scenes stuff. There's a lot of artists that I support on Patreon where you get cool stuff that you just never would have expected would even be available, and it's just regularly available on Patreon. It's just very, very cool. So this little plug for Patreon, and maybe when you're over there, check out patreon.com/doofmedia and check out the stuff that we offer, which includes some bonus podcasts.
Yeah. I think we've mentioned before that we're kind of in the process of seeing how else we could provide y'all with some bonus stuff. We've got one thing in the works outside of the bonus podcast we're doing right now, which just had a new episode last week for you guys. Constantly kind of retooling and relooking at that. So I think it's always a good time to join us on Patreon, I think.
Yep.
All right. Of course, if you cannot afford to do that, that is okay. There are tons of other ways to help us out that don't cost you a single solitary dime. By the way, you can just sign up to join Patreon for free. You don't get access to any of the bonus stuff, but we do make public posts there every once in a while to update people on schedule, let people know when we're going live in any capacity, and those will be public and available. So if you just want to join for free, just to kind of be a little bit part of the community, you can. That doesn't cost anything. And of course, you can always leave us ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts, on any of the multiple podcast review platforms out there. We do have some new reviews, Matt. We have a new one from Apple Podcasts this week that comes from Bunny Bear 1327, who says, fantastic podcasting. They give us 5 stars and says, after making my way through all of Kingslingers, I was very happy to continue the journey deep dive into Flanagan's work. I also enjoy an occasional doof dive. My one complaint / suggestion is, if you clip me, then clip me. I still enjoy the podcast through audio, not video, and talking over the clips that you use as reference is jarring. Very excited for Dr. Sleep. Well, thank you for that little bit of feedback. We are kind of constantly with our editor looking at new and different ways of bringing the clips and the quotes and the bits from the movies and the television we're talking about into the show. one of the ways that we've tried recently is just literally cutting to the clip and we dump Matt and I's voice and we're just listening to the show. I think that's been working great. Netflix disagrees and keeps yelling at us, but we always win under fair use regards. But the other thing we were trying is moments where we layer the clip over us talking, and in some moments we have the clip kind of playing quietly in the background. I think those are really, really functional when you're watching it, because you can like see, oh, we've cut to a clip now, and that's why I'm hearing in the background of Scott and Matt talking a little bit of the clip noise. But I think I agree, generally in an audio situation that might not be as clear and might be a little confusing. Why am I suddenly hearing noises in the background? So yeah, I mean, we're continuing to iterate and investigate and explore. So appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. Thanks for your kind words too.
Yeah. No, appreciate that. And everyone, thank you so much. I've seen our number of reviews go up pretty substantially in the past week, and that's because we made those very real threats and you all listened to them.
That's right.
So thank you so much for that. People respond to threats, Matt. Keep that in mind.
Yep, that's right.
All right, folks, my voice is literally dying right now, so we're going to wrap up this episode. We'll be back here next week for chapters 7 through 9 of Stephen King's Dr. Sleep. Until then, rest in peace, Mr. Flanagan.